we had the 3D TSG, a working meeting in London from Tuesday, October 22nd to Thursday, October 24th, where the goals were to have at least rough determinations on all the major components that we're expecting to go into Prezi 4. And these were sort of the main topics that we were intending to consider. So there is an existing 3D draft spec with sort of partial coverage. It's not even minimum viable product yet, but we did want to talk about it, to talk about what was already in there, to see what else we need to cover. And then we wanted to discuss sort of commenting annotations in 3D, content state, user interface interactions, and some animations. And so across the 2 or 3 days, we did that, and this document contains sort of summaries of the determinations from that. Let me go ahead and make bigger. And it just links back to because the working meeting document has sort of full notes throughout. But so among things, first, sort of not really necessarily dealing with 3D. We talked about this at the end, but I moved this up to the front because it conceptually makes sense. So we do think we are planning to move forward to suggest that in 4.0 that we are going to add timeline as well as canvas and scene, where timeline contains only audio content, and therefore in 4, canvas can no longer contain only audio content. And as I'm going, I'll sort of pause between each of these sections. But really, if anyone has thoughts or wants to make a correction or ask questions, please speak up, raise a hand, whatever.
Could I ask about this one?
What'd you say, Glenn?
Can I ask about this one?
Yeah, do.
So when we discussed this a long time ago, there wasn't a kind of a strong direction. So was there kind of a strong reason for including it this time? Because I think this will make for a breaking change on 3, which we were hoping to avoid. So it'd be great to have some background on why this was felt strongly this time.
Yeah, which I don't know if Rob or Mike wants to throw in on this.
So there are a bunch of other breaking changes, such as the collection paging issue. So that's a really significant breaking change. So yes, while it would have been nice if you could have simply updated 3 to 4 and been 4.0 compliant. The advantage to doing that we discussed as being really negligible, because most clients will quite happily implement both 3 and 4. So if you have a 3.0 environment, then that's going to continue to be supported by the major clients that support 3. Given the changes to 4, and as we've seen from 2 to 3, which is a much bigger set of changes, the way that the clients handle it is to sort of update from the previous version, you rewrite it into the current version. Given that there's Manifesto and other libraries, that work only needs to be done once or twice, rather than for every single client. So we couldn't really see a strong enough rationale for holding back on changes that make everything much easier to understand and implement, just to not have a breaking change when we're going to have other breaking changes, and a major version is intentionally for breaking changes. If it was just to add scene, and there was no breaking changes, then we could do 3.1 rather than 4. So yeah, so then the positive reasons rather than the not negative reasons, are that it makes it much easier to describe the requirements. And then if it's easier to describe requirements, e.g. timelines have duration but not height and width, canvases must have height and width and may have duration, scenes have infinite dimensions and may have duration, then the validation is also easier. right? So the documentation's easier, which makes it easier to understand. The validation is easier to implement, which makes it easier to implement it properly. So yeah, we thought that the overall, the benefits of doing it were stronger than the downsides of not doing it.
Thanks,
Thank
Rob.
you.
Yeah. Glenn, you're easy with that, I hope.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I've got to give a tech update in the online meeting in a couple of weeks, so I'll probably ask about all of the breaking changes so I can flag them early for people to know. But it's useful to know the background. Thanks.
Thanks.
Yeah.
So those three things will be expected or be likely, going forward. But Julie, in line with Paul's, anyone else want to come in on this? Okay.
Okay,
Yeah,
cool.
happy to. Thanks.
Just
Yeah.
wanted to say, I tried to make some notes, but if you want to add something to document that in a better way, please feel free to throw in some buzzwords, maybe.
Right.
Okay. Cool. All right. So, and then I think most of the rest of this is very, very 3D specific. So we sort of rediscussed default orientations for cameras and lights, and we decided that the directions that are defined in the existing sort of 3D draft spec are good, that lights point down towards -y and cameras point backwards towards -z, which that's because we have a convention that we are using a coordinate system where +z points toward the viewer. So +z points this way, and so default camera orientation mimics sort of how someone standing in the scene would see it from that position. And just to point out that any painting annotation that doesn't have a position specified is placed at the scene's origin, which means if you don't specify a position or an orientation for a camera, your camera is at the origin looking towards -z backwards. So, and we also talked a little bit about camera up vectors, where the camera up vector both determines some of the view the camera has in the scene, but it also determines some of the user interface interaction behaviors in terms of, as you drag the screen up or down, how are you moving within the scene? And so we had decided that by default, the camera's up vector is directly upward. It's towards +y, which given our coordinate system is probably the most logical way for that to happen. And we talked about possible ways of modifying camera up vectors, which the determination from the meeting is that the only way to do that there's no custom property, the only way to do that would be to place the camera in a scene and then annotate that scene into a second scene, transforming or positioning the sub-scene, which would achieve sort of modifying the up vector of the camera. And the reason for doing that, as opposed to providing a special vector property, was sort of given to try and avoid sort of significantly increasing the length and complexity of the spec document, and also to have one way of achieving that goal, which of course is something we're trying to do with IIIF. Which I think you'll see that rationale to avoid significantly increasing spec length and complexity multiple times throughout this process. All right, to hit a few pretty. Oh yeah, please.
Sorry.
Yeah, please jump in.
I'm not quite getting what camera up vector is. Could you...
Yeah. So if you think about it, camera up vector can be thought of in a couple of ways. One is if you think of the camera as a square looking into the scene, the up vector sort of determines to some degree like the rotation of the camera in the scene, but also if you have an object that you want your camera, so if this is my object and this is my camera, and I'm in orbit mode, which actually, so that my object remains here, and as I sort of click and drag up or down on the screen, the camera is going to go up or down. The up vector determines when I click and drag, down or up, what way does the camera actually go? So for instance, if I wanted my camera to be 45 degrees offset, and I wanted going up on the screen to pull in this way, that's what I would use the up vector for, it determines as I move the camera, this is like my touchstone for you know, if I'm pulling up or down on the screen, what is the actual orbital change in the space that is achieved? Does that make sense?
I think so, and it also affects the left, right as well, or is up,
Yeah, I
down
guess it should.
special?
It should. No. It should as well.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and so yeah, one more thing I'll add is it's a very frequent thing discussed by 3D viewer frameworks. So it's not uncommon to interact with the up effector. And you know, I'll note I won't get into it now, but I did put a suggestion in the meeting notes for us to sort of have a further discussion on this, because I personally have, you know, I have some thoughts about it, but this is the determination that was decided during the meeting.
Okay,
And
thanks.
what might be helpful is to look down the running notes from last time, 16th of these meetings, 16th of October. And Vince had worked an example of focusing on a glove, and there's an image there, and the glove is horizontal, whereas the spacesuit is normally upright. So the view has been rotated 90 degrees and now is face on to that glove, and you'd want to be able to move up and down focusing on the glove in the new orientation.
Right.
Great, thanks.
Yeah, so that discussion sort of started from, yeah, how would you reproduce this view specifically?
Thanks.
Yep. Anything further on that? Okay, cool. Yeah, I think this is just a few small things. We asked the question, you know, does the current spec prevent, you know, a possible extension camera from requiring a fixed aspect ratio? Because right now we're saying the aspect ratio is determined by basically the page that the scene is within. We were like, no, that is a thing that extensions could do, and that we don't think that this is affecting it as it is. We had a question: if you have an annotation that instead of targeting, say, a commenting annotation, if you want to put a label on a place in space, and you're not annotating targeting a point, say you target a polygon, you know, do we want to be instructive to the client about how to find a point? Like, should they calculate the centroid center of that polygon in space? And we decided no, that's client dependent. That we could give a centroid as an example, but there are multiple ways of calculating centroids. And so we can leave it up to the client to decide how exactly they want to find a specific point in a polygon or a volume if they want to. And similarly, scenes and canvases, we had, you know, specified a new background color property. And then we were saying, well, can you set that on an image content resource, on an area in space? And no, we decided that those could only be specified on a canvas or a scene. We also talked a little bit about how to specify color values. The existing draft spec suggests that they should be 6-character hex values, which we expanded that to allow for transparency, to say that we still want strings, we still want hex values, but allowing up to 8 characters to specify like an RGBA color, where the A channel is used for transparency, which is transparency for a background color may be useful on a canvas painted into a scene.
And part of the discussion was to do it by numeric values or hex and scale rather than the variable names of colors that
Yep.
worried some people.
Yeah, and Glenn, yeah, the intent there is, yeah, it's hex color, it's hex RGBA or RGB. All right, and then we talked about commenting, annotation, label display, because yeah, so this links back into these notes documents, but so we wanted to talk a little bit about if you have 2 commenting annotations on a model in a scene, how do you avoid label sort of overlap? How do you avoid label occlusion, where one label is sitting in front of the other? And sometimes viewers do need hints from manifest producers in order to avoid that situation. And so what we decided, let me make this bigger to match. There we go. So what we decided to fix the problem of label occlusion and to allow for specifying how a commenting annotation label body is displayed in a scene is that, so if you have a commenting annotation where the body is a textual body, we are going to allow that textual body to take a property called something like position. Probably this term is too generic. Probably that term needs to be rethought, but for now I'm just going to call it position. And this position property on the textual body is a specific resource that allows targeting the scene and targeting a point in the scene. So what that allows you to do, because the commenting annotation also has a target of a scene, is if we have a commenting annotation label, the target selector point is the place in the scene that you are annotating. That is the thing that you want to talk about. But the body position selector tells you where the label body should be displayed in the scene. So you effectively have a 2-point system where one of the points is the thing you're targeting in the scene, and the other tells you where to put the label display. And a thing I pointed out in the determinations document, and I think we discussed during the meeting, of course, is, because we've had some discussions of, well, do we need to specify an offset vector in this case? But because you are specifying 2 points, together they make a vector. And so clients that need vectors for displaying things like normals or other things like that are, if they choose, able to use the 2 points here to, they have a vector. They are able to make use of a vector for those if they need them. Yeah, which the rationale for this is, yeah, we thought that there is a strong need for viewers to be able to not have label overlap and occlusion, but there's also sort of a balancing strong need for simplicity for publishers who are creating manifests. And this, again, allows us to do this without inflating spec length or complexity by adding vectors, but it still gives us a 2-point system. It lets people customize where their labels are displayed. And if a viewer decides to, it can also be used for commenting annotation directionality where appropriate. Does anyone else want to add anything else there? I feel like this was a pretty significant discussion. It's taken up a number of TSG meetings. And so yeah, so I think this was a pretty significant determination from this meeting.
Can I ask the second position? Is that the top left, centroid, or?
Yeah, so I don't think that we decided. There was a little bit of discussion. I don't remember if we decided specifically what that case is. It may be the sort of thing that viewers need to decide, because it may be, depending on where you rotate the model, you may need to change which corner of the label annotation that connects to. So for instance, like if I have my label and I'm floating in space and I'm moving my view over here, as it gets closer to this side, I may want to go from connecting to this side to connecting to the other side. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is that, and that's what the Voyager viewer, which was the example that Jamie had shared,
right.
did. We did talk about having a default of top left of the annotation text. But I think that's, well, see what others think, but I think that's part of what we have to test out also, and how different viewers will handle it.
Right. I'm trying to see if I can bring up the.
Yeah, so the example though was one Jamie had shared about, I mean, it was quite a nice homage. It's a Pittsburgh Pirate of fame that I grew up with. So
Yeah. So even in this specific, given that it's showing you an offset bar here, if I rotate from side to side, you can see that it will change which corner it uses just for better display. So yeah, I think it's probably better for us. I mean, we can address the question in the spec maybe, but I do, or I don't know, cookbook recipe, but I think it's valuable to let clients make that decision for themselves.
because there's been an ongoing discussion that some viewers may default to having a sidebar for the annotation, and that's probably part of the iterations we have to go through and further testing too,
Exactly.
without over specifying.
Yep. Exactly.
And
Oh, yeah,
also,
please.
sorry, the
Okay.
position part, that's not in W3C web annotations. That's something we'd have to define in IIIF. Is that right?
I believe so. Yeah.
Yep, that's right.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's the potential for WKT, which is another well-known way to do this. Yeah.
I don't think we need a WKT. I think generally we
Okay.
need WKT selectors when we need to specify something other than points. If we need to
Yeah.
specify polygons, which
Okay.
I suppose, I mean, theoretically, depending on how you wrote the spec, it's conceivably possible, I guess, so you could have a specific resource in this with a WKT selector. I'm not quite sure what that would mean, but
Yeah.
I mean,
Fair enough.
how we had sketched it out is we're you know, you can just use point selectors as well as
Yeah.
transforms and things like that.
No, thanks.
Mhm.
Yep. Yeah, and I would also add that we had discussed expanding the look at property of camera annotations to take the same specific resource structure. Basically to allow a camera to, because the benefit of this, apologies for cat noises behind me, if you can hear my cat meowing, but is that since the position takes a specific resource, it means that you can target a scene. And the benefit of this is that if we had a scene with a subscene annotated within it, you could target the subscene to grab a point from within that subscene. And so it makes sense for us for look at on cameras to allow a similar behavior so that if you had a scene annotated of a chessboard with pawns and a camera in the parent scene, that the camera could look at one of the pawns specifically from the subscene. Are there any other questions or thoughts about this one?
Yeah, that last point was again trying to be as consistent and have less divergence of
Exactly.
ways to do things.
Okay. Yeah, so we have been in previous TSG meetings discussing user interaction viewing hints, so navigation modes and view restrictions. And at some points in the meetings, we had talked about having a basic set of simple navigation modes to tell the client how the scene is intended to be navigated, and maybe adding to that a very granular list of view restriction statements on top of that. Out of this meeting, we decided that we're not going to support the granular view restrictions. It seemed potentially very complex, and our intent is not to create a game engine or something like that. We want to have a focus on the content in the scene, but we want to have, in the same way that there are viewing hints for 2D AV content, we want to have some viewing hints for that. So I think we landed on 5 navigation modes, and I added a comment about is there a default, but the 5 navigation modes that we discussed are locked, which means that the camera cannot be moved, which includes no zoom or dollying, no truck, which moving camera side to side or up down. Orbit, which largely means orbiting around an object. Different clients may decide to interpret that as full 360 orbiting or hemisphere orbiting or some other sort of angle locking around the object, and that the truck behavior of the camera similarly here is client dependent. We did think it was a good idea to provide a navigation mode on top of that for hemisphere orbit, which is explicitly orbit around the object, but if you can, lock it to a hemisphere or otherwise. The use case for this is consumers may have models that they only want users to view the front of. You may have a photogrammetry model of a building where you didn't get good coverage of the back, and so you don't want users to rotate around the back. So this is how you tell clients this is how you want this to be viewed. Free, which it's like first person mode. It's you are the camera looking up, down, left, or right. And in free, there's an implication that you can also move. You can strafe the camera side to side, move forward or backwards, maybe up or down. But then because you may want to support free looking, but not moving the camera around, we also wanted to add free direction, which so that's same as free, but you can't move the camera. And that is sort of equivalent to a hemisphere orbit where you have your camera at the same thing that you are looking at. So a zero distance hemisphere orbit is what is meant by that. And yeah, so, and these are just sort of initial values for this. Clients may be able to provide custom values to interpret. This would be very easy to extend for people that want to add additional navigation modes in the future.
Yeah, in case it helps, among the use cases considered was the walkthrough that is scripted effectively. The walkthrough that's not scripted at all, or you're on a moving bus, you can look around, but the bus movement is scripted, or
Right.
whatever, segue, or it doesn't matter. So those last three cover some of that.
Yep.
Well, actually, they cover in different ways, yeah.
Yeah, but and yeah, just as an addendum to this, yeah, we did decide for a camera annotation that has navigation mode orbit or hemisphere orbit, the orbit point for that camera is the look at point. So it's whatever the camera is looking at.
Yeah.
We also talked some more about content exclusion. So this is, if I want to pull in a scene, but I don't want the lights from that scene, or I want, maybe I want to pull in a video, but I don't want the audio. The existing draft spec provides for that with an exclude property with 4 values: audio, lights, camera, and annotation. And, oh yeah, so yeah, if look at is not specified, then is it the orbit origin? Yes. Or at least I would think that's probably the only sensible solution there. Yeah, so we sort of talked about, do we want to add additional terms to exclude? And I think we decided no, mainly because the point of the property is just, to avoid I pull in a scene, it has audio and it, messes up my scene by causing sort of a screeching sound. But we're not necessarily concerned with providing sort of fine-grained filtering of imported contents. So that's why, for instance, we rejected adding video to this list, because we were like, well, if you place a video in a scene, you sort of have to actually place a video in a scene, and that video is in one specific, spot in the scene. It just makes sense that it's there, versus, oh, I put in a scene, but it has omnipresent audio or something like that. The audio is much more likely to interfere. It's more likely to mess up the scene than say like a video just being placed somewhere.
Yeah, and if I may, one of the options too that wasn't needed in the exclude is if there's a video or something embedded in another scene, a model that you can in another scene, you can extract the individual elements and deal with them, rather than, as you're saying, rather than fine grain, switch this off, switch this on, etc. So
Right. Yep. Absolutely. Yeah, and speaking of content imported from subscenes annotated into a parent scene, we did discuss that cameras and lights that are imported, they do come along. So if you are taking a scene and annotating it into your parent scene, the cameras and lights do come along. If you don't give a default camera in your parent scene, then the first camera in the list of subscenes gets used as the default. And that if you wish to override that, if you wish to have a default, you should specify one in the parent scene.
and similar with lights, as you're saying.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Or use exclude or
use
content
exclude,
state
yeah.
to hide or something like that.
Yeah.
Okay. And then, so this is for the small amount of text that this is actually a pretty, I think, significant addition, pretty neat, which is we had this question: can we support user interaction that causes changes or state alterations within a scene? So the example for this, I don't have it queued up to show, is like Ed Silverton's produced a 3D model of a music box where there is a button on the front of the music box where if a user clicks the button, the music box opens and a ballerina inside the music box rotates around and music plays. And so we were thinking, is there a way to support that? What we were thinking is that in the new version of the spec, we can supply a new annotation motivation called activating, where an activating annotation is used to connect a painting annotation in a scene to a content state. And so it just provides a connection between these two things, and it indicates to the client that when a user interacts with the painting annotation, and what that means may be dependent on the client. It may be clicking on the painting annotation. It may be tapping it, interacting with it in some way, that the client should trigger the content state as a result. So for the activating annotation, that is targeted to the painting annotation, and the content state is the body value. And only one content state can be specified, which I will go here to find. We just provided a very, very simple example of this. So this is our activating annotation targeted at a model. If the user, say, clicks on a model, the client knows that it should activate the linked content state. Which, again, sounds simple, but that does allow you, with this sort of user interaction in the scene, or maybe in a sidebar, causing actual changes within the scene, which may be necessary for sort of interactive, truly interactive scenes, not just interacting through camera, but actually modifying the scene contents.
So that would, as we discussed, would give some ability to, say, move through a guided tour, as it were, and push this when you're finished, or something along those lines.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah, and that would give you the ability to, you could have very, very, very simple, if you were doing a guided, because with a guided tour, you could do that with commenting annotations or content states, but this would allow the user to sort of actually do almost very, very, very simple choose your own adventure sort of things, or yeah. Okay. Yep. Moving on from that, we sort of discussed, I think we sort of got a little bit specific about the different ways of associating content states with scenes, because content states, I think, with 3D become very important if you want to do storytelling. Most advanced storytelling use cases are handled through content states. So the different ways of associating a content state with a scene, one of them would be the activating annotation that we just described. Another would be to, and I note here this is very vague. I think I could use help from someone else to sort of clarify, but you can simply list content state annotations in a manifest, let them stand alone, which tells that the viewer that a user should be able to select from these content states, and each content state should modify the scene how it is indicated. That's I believe that's just listing them as items. But and the third is to provide a content state annotation as a scope on another annotation, like a commenting annotation. And that tells the viewer that I have a commenting annotation. Say I'm labeling a thing in the scene, and I need you to modify the scene to provide essential context or scope for viewing that commenting annotation. So if I want to provide a custom camera view for a commenting annotation, this is the most direct way of doing that and I will move to this document to show, and there's an even more full example if people want to follow this link, but if I have my commenting annotation where I am trying to label something in the scene, and I am targeting a point in the scene that I am putting the label on it, but I want a camera view to view that commenting annotation. I could put it scope, content state, and then put my camera view in the items here, so that would tell the viewer, include this in the list of commenting annotations, but when that commenting annotation is activated, load this content state, because this content state provides essential context for viewing that annotation. So I want you to view this annotation from this camera view, or I want you to change the background color, or I want you to change the lighting, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Anything you can achieve with a content state. But so those are the three ways. Activating annotation, just include the content state on the manifest, or add the content state as a scope on another annotation.
Can I ask, for the second one, did you discuss that as a possible structure? Like a table of contents, would that work in that part of the manifest?
I think I'd like to hear someone else throw in here, because I think this second option is sort of like, I think it's sort of just like the default. triple AF for how you would just throw it in a manifest. But yes, I guess you could do it as a table of contents. You could do it as, I mean, I feel like you could also do it as a guided tour, step 1, step 2, step 3. But I don't know if someone else wants to throw in here. That's why I said the language is vague. I feel like this could be more specific.
We did spend a bit of time in some illustrations and working out how linear or potentially circular could be. So the linear approach is very much like a table of contents, as you're saying. Go from step 1 to step 2, step 3. But
Yep.
I think there's enough scope here, enough options to go from 1 to 3. But that's something, as I say, we spend a lot of time talking through and need to workshop out. I mean,
Right.
do some samples, but see what others want to say about it.
Yeah, so I don't think it's the same as ranges and structure, because
Right.
that's explicitly, here is the set of canvases or parts of canvases that you divide, that you can use to divide up the overall manifest. Whereas you can't really divide up the scene because it's infinite. You could have different views, but that's not partitioning. It's just a series of points. So I can see the similarities, right? If you're thinking about it as views, but there would be no need to, for example, change all of the existing ranges into being content states, because you wouldn't then get the structure part of it, right? You'd get, here is a point, or here's a view on a canvas, but you wouldn't say it's, chapter 1 is canvas 1, 2, 3, and 4. And then the second chapter is 5 through 20, like we have at the moment. You'd just be able to say, take the user to, when you click on chapter 2, you'd go to 5, but you wouldn't know that 6 through 20 were also part of chapter 2. So I see that they're related, but I think they're quite different use cases.
So would this potentially be a new property, or would you have annotations at the manifest level?
Be in the annotations block at the manifest level, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, let me then change that. Yeah, included as an annotation on a manifest. Yeah, and the other thing that I'll throw in here is the scope property. So like this is actually web annotation data model. We're not introducing anything new here. And in fact, the definition of scope from web annotation data model is something like this provides essential context for viewing the annotation itself. So our use in this is actually very much in line with the description of that from the web annotation spec.
So I think one of our challenges is to show examples of these things as we go forward, and then see how they look in the viewers.
Yep. Okay. Yeah. Are there any other sort of thoughts about this?
But it's good you raised the question, because we are trying to make sure there is at least some way to do the prescriptive linear, or the choose your own adventure, or the free form.
Right.
I think
Okay.
that makes a lot of sense. I think we should flag up for a future discussion what structures and ranges do for 3D, and if they're even allowed. But yeah, later on.
I agree. I agree. Yeah, if someone could make sure to add that to the running note for this meeting. Yep. Okay. And keeping in mind that we have 8 minutes left in the current meeting, I'm going to go ahead and move on to press through the last things.
Cheers.
Yeah. So we talked about animations. And I will say that, animations in a 3D context can be complex in that one model can have multiple different animations, of different types. Often, but maybe not always, animations will have sort of key names to help you know to play them. And, we talked a lot about what is the scope for animations, how deeply do we want to get into this, how much do we want to expand spec complexity, or how much is left up for extensions or versions of the spec past 4.0. And a thing that we took note of is that and I'll add a link to the selector registry, but the registry of selectors for IIIF defines two existing type of content selectors, audio content selectors and visual content selectors, which are sort of useful here. So the audio content selector says, hey, I have a video, I'm annotating it into a scene, but I only want you to play the audio content. Or maybe I have a video, but I only want you to show the visual content. And the registry of selectors does not go deep into detail of how these are used or how they interact with things. And we thought that a similar sort of model could be used to give at least some small coverage for animation to indicate to clients, that, I want this animation from the model, but without getting too deep into all of the sort of dizzying complexities here. So we are thinking to establish a new selector, animation selector. I should remove the space there, which, unlike these, audio content selector and visual content selector don't take, thank you for adding the link. Those selectors don't take any properties. Animation selector would take a property. It would take a value property that identifies a string name of an animation associated with the model. This would indicate to the client, I want you to play this animation. Which we may mirror the current approach, which is rather than adding this to the Prezi spec, we may add this new selector to the selector registry and then provide a cookbook recipe to show how it can be used. Alternately, there was some discussion on the third day that maybe it's worth pulling these three selectors into the spec. I think there is probably future discussion between the editors to decide what makes sense when drafting the spec, whether it makes sense to keep these out or pull them in. Someone say something if you think this is not an accurate characterization. My impression from the meeting was that more advanced animation use cases, having the animation granularly interact with the timeline, transition between animations, whether the state is looping or play once, those I feel like we're considered those out of scope for 4.0, possibly good candidates for an extension, but because we don't. This could potentially swamp the spec, frankly. This could be at least the length of everything else that we do, if not twice or three times that. But this is what we were thinking thus far.
Yeah, and just to add, I think one of the alternatives is if there's something vexing you about a scene you'd import, you go and change that scene before importing it.
Right.
That's at least a belt and braces.
So
Go
can I
ahead. Go ahead. Yeah.
check if I understand? So animations, are they disabled by default unless they're in a selector, or are they enabled in default, or is it not said?
I mean, it is possible it could be client dependent. I mean, I don't remember if we discussed this.
No,
I would think it would be logical to disable unless otherwise, but maybe other people disagree. But
well, no, I think the only question in my mind is, because of the various selectors, is there a normative default for all of them? Like they're all on unless you turn them off, because otherwise we'll default off for this and default on for the other. So anyway, it's a question to finalize.
That's a fair point, especially since you can use exclude to exclude animations if they are on by default.
Yeah.
That's a fair point, actually. Yeah, maybe it is most logical to have it on by default. Yeah.
Yes, and I think
But-
in most viewers it's autoplay. So when they, even if they don't support animations explicitly, when you upload a model with an animation, it's usually just shown if the viewer is able to show animations. So usually they are just activated, so to say, by default.
Makes sense. Cool. Well, yeah, because just a few more minutes. So we discussed transitions between content state. I will, you can read the text here, but we generally consider transitions to be out of scope. There's a lot of potential complexity there. If if there was a strong demand for it, it could be a non-breaking change for 4.1. It doesn't seem like something that adding support would be a breaking change. And I'm going to skip past that real quick just to address the last thing we talked about is content states. And by default, the content state is thought of as a diff from the manifest original state. So it sort of suggests that the content state should reset the manifest to its original state to apply the content state's sort of diff changes. And you start to really run into a thorny issue with that if you have say multiple subscenes nested within each other, and then you have content states that only target some of those. It's sort of how does that reset propagate up or down the chain? And if you assume a complete and total reset behavior, it starts to become very impossible to do certain things. It might take me a bit to explain, but it just if you start to sort of play out how that works, you very quickly run into some walls. And we thought that the solution or a solution to this will be to add a reset behavior on content state, and that when reset is true, then all children of the scene targeted by the content state should be reset to their initial states before applying the content state diff. So that could include subscenes all the way down. And then if reset is not present, then you just apply the changes in the content state to the current scene contents, and you don't have to like reset down the tree or anything like that. Which at least and this is something, we worked through many examples. I think a lot of those examples are not necessarily in the notes, but I feel like when we worked through the examples, this was satisfactory for dealing with the thorny implementation challenges here.
Yeah. It's circling back. It was one of the ways to try to tease out if you want to jump from state 1 to state 4, it might be helpful to reset any changes that have been made in 1 and 2 so that you have pristine state 1 to 2 to 3 and then 4 when you do the diffs between them. So it gives you what you would expect rather than however you left it in 1 and 2, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and similarly, this probably won't make a lot of sense explained in a very brief way, but if you have a chessboard in a scene, and then you have a scene that has 4 chessboard pieces, and then I have a content state that rotates those 4 chessboard pieces, and then I have a second content state that moves this piece up 1, it's like, what happens? Does that go this way because it's been rotated here, or does it reset this and move it there? It's like, how does that apply down the chain? Because if it always resets, then there's no way for me to rotate this way and then move it up, because it will always reset and do that. And that's probably not what a publisher wants. So, that's why we're thinking you probably need some slightly more fine-grained control of whether the content state resets everything or whether it just applies its, diff to the things that it is targeting, which in this case, the second content state would just be applying to the model. Yeah, to allow you to do things like that.